Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Agers, and for my country report, I decided to report on Egypt. Now, during this presentation, I hope to provide you all with some information on how to effectively and efficiently market in Egypt. Let's get started. The economy of Egypt was a highly planned economy focused on import substitution. This means that the economy controls and regulates production, distribution, and prices, and they would focus on substituting their imports with domesticated production and not foreign imports. After the Gulf War in 1991, Egypt fell into such debt. Now, debt is never a good thing, but this actually strengthened Egypt's government. Instead of a more domesticated production economy, they began to move towards a more market-oriented economy with a more increased foreign investment. From the years 2004 to 2009, their growth macroeconomically jumped 8% annually over that span. Though this helped the economy prosper, the government failed to allocate these new earnings equally. Egypt has an unemployment rate of 12.8% as of 2015. So with that being said, Egypt's foreign exchange reserves tanked from $36 billion to $16.3 billion. And just like individuals have credit score ratings, countries do as well. Egypt had a B-plus credit score that has been slowly declining ever since 2011. A CCC plus rating is the lowest it had gotten in 2013, but is at a stable B- now as of November 2015. Their GDP sits fairly high at $303 billion, which sits in the 21st percentile in the world. The labor force is comprised of 28 million people. Egypt is known for exporting crude oil, cotton, textiles, metal products, and agricultural goods. As of 2016, Egypt spends about $1.19 billion in exports, while their imports are almost 3 times as much at $3.7 billion. I think Egypt should try and move their government in a more domesticated production way like they used to be. I say this because their imports outweigh their exports by almost triple. About 50% of the GDP sector for Egypt's economy relies on cultivation. The global financial crisis from 2008 to 2011 really took its toll on Egypt, with grain prices soaring, making it hard for growth. In an economic sense, I would say that Egypt should improve productivity, competition, and strengthen and build the trust in their government that has had its ups and downs. Egypt's economy is still suffering from a severe downturn following the 2011 revolution, and the government faces numerous challenges as to how to restore growth, market, and investor confidence. Some demographic information. Egypt lies in the Middle East and is the third most populous country in Africa. About 95% of the country's 82.5 million people live along the Nile River. However, a proportion of the population is moving out of the rural areas and has moved to cities in search of employment and a higher standard of living. Egyptians have a very youthful population with about 75% of the people under the age of 25 and only 3% over the age of 65. This means that marketers should target college graduates since there are so many of them populating the country. Also, if outsourcing is something that interests a business, then why not upstart a business in Egypt? College students are very eager and ready to begin employment, and with them fresh out of college, salary negotiations should start fairly low. Now, Egypt is not landlocked and has the largest river on earth to use at its disposal for transporting goods, along with the Mediterranean Sea to its north and the Red Sea to its east. Sudan borders Egypt to the south, while Israel and Libya border Egypt to the east and west, respectively. Some things about their culture. The religion that is most popular is Muslim at about 90%, followed by Christianity at about 10%. Child labor laws are taken very seriously in Egypt. This is considered a serious crime, and charges are taken very seriously. As for schooling, there are 13 major universities consisted of 500,000 students. Football, or soccer, is the most popular sport in Egypt. 40% live below the poverty line, making less than $2 a day, and 90% of unemployed Egyptians are under the age of 30. With all the government uprisings in the last years, the culture has been that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Many people do strongly distrust the government, so an authoritative tone is not too pleasing to Egyptians. Egyptians are very proud of who they are as well. Their national pride resonates as an ambitious symbol of victory. Egyptians are very pride-oriented. A little bit about the technology in Egypt. The Egyptian Revolution played a huge role in the Egyptians' involvement towards government. Most of the protests were organized via Facebook and Twitter. Brands need to connect authentically via media outlets that they trust without dominating their content. Brands need to be smart and respectful when engaging in the Egyptian public. They don't want to be told when and where they will be marketed, for their generation calls the shots. Traditional media like television, print, and radio feel too corporate. To market well in Egypt, make your brand messaging dignified and purposeful. Marketers should consider the strong demands and attitudes that the Egyptian community expressed during the revolution and develop ideas that reflect a strong character. Some advertising tactics that have been done. So as I was searching on the internet for advertisements conveyed to Egyptians, many brands use the Egyptians themselves and the Egyptian pyramids. Brands such as Coca-Cola and AT&T have done this. Marketers want to promote a patriotic sense of positivity. Coca-Cola is attacking Egyptians with a brighter tomorrow and "Let's rebuild Egypt and make tomorrow a lot better and sweeter than today" campaign. The banking system in Egypt. The sales tax in Egypt is fairly high compared to the average of the United States, well, the states in the U.S., and is a little lower than that of Egypt's 10%. Egypt is pretty dependent on their sales tax as a government. For every $1 American dollar, that's worth 7.83 Egyptian pounds. Their currency is pretty sweet, if I must say so. As for their banking system, Egyptian banks are still well behind other Western banks in supplying a good range of mortgage products to their clients. The mortgages there are underdeveloped and foreigners cannot yet obtain a property in Egypt. If Egypt can afford to give out more mortgages and loans to others, this would help stimulate their economy. Some competitive advantage of Egypt. Egyptian labor tends to be cheap compared to other countries. They have also concluded agreements with several economic groupings, with the European Union, QIZ agreement with the US, the Arab Free Trade Agreement, and the COMESA agreement, an agreement with all the African nations. Egypt is also the center of the world and can be reached by several other neighboring nations. Some of the Egyptian needs. In terms of what Egypt needs, I would consider a new education system and a more openness to international markets as well as new markets. I believe that more trade could happen with their natural energy and gases. Not necessarily to other countries, but by developing and attracting investment in their industries that require oil as raw material. Now back to the school reform. Egypt falls in the 60th percentile when it comes to GDP spending on education, with a little less than 4%. The dropout rate for Egypt is about half. That needs to change. A 50% dropout rate. I will now go into some natural resources that Egypt uses. Egypt is a warm place and has an abundance of water. Although in recent years, Egypt has been prone to a desertification, which means that land is becoming a desert. So, over the years, it has been hard to harvest crops in this location. Besides the fact, Egypt grows cotton, rice, corn, wheat, tobacco, and many other resources. They also have a huge crude oil refinery, but Egypt chooses to keep it and use it in their own country instead of exporting their resources. What happens is that Egypt's oil consumption is overusing production. That has a cause for concern and needs to be changed. Now, Egypt is not a bad country. They just are going through some tough times. So, and like I said, the revolution has been a way of life for the Egyptians, and their future is riding on it. They have proven to be smart and dignified. And your messaging should be too. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.